Well, hi, everybody. This is Andy Greenberg, and I'm so glad we have an opportunity to be together again, although obviously not in person. So, have you heard about who's coming to town? No, 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 not the song. Have you heard who's coming to town in right here in South Florida, which is one of the most popular figures, in around? A fella by the name of Tony Robbins. Yes, Tony Robbins will be here, one of the most magnificent motivational speakers ever to grace the stage. And of course, Tony Robbins, you might remember him, a tall guy, and he's got these big teeth, and he started out with nothing and grew into a multi-million dollar empire motivating people. And how does he motivate people? He gives them these great ideas on how to improve themselves, how to examine themselves, how to find their faults, how to get rid of bad memories, and how to create new memories, and how to live a happy and fulfilling life. He has written books, he has been in movies, he even had his own TV show that lasted 2 weeks, and many, many other things. So if you're interested in understanding how to get motivated, how to live a better life, may I suggest that you go to your internet when this discussion is done and you look up Tony Robbins and you buy the tickets. Now, on the other hand, if you don't want to do that and you really want to understand what life is all about, if you really want to understand how to live a better life, even at our age, then you don't have to go visit Tony Robbins. Because Judaism has that built into our spirituality and into our tradition and into our heritage. And what is that called? The high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, designed really to do what everything that Tony Robbins does, with one exception. We not only examine the relationship we have with ourselves, we not only examine the relationship that we have with other people, we also examine the relationship that we have with God. And we do that once a year without having to go to a motivational seminar. So, what I want to be able to do on this discussion, and boy, I really wish it was interactive, is talk about some of these traditions that we have for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And where the idea of the high holy days came from. Is there such a thing as the book of life? Is there such a thing as the book of death? And what does it mean in many of our customs that we do certain things? And I really hope that you enjoy some of the information that we're going to be sharing, because I really want to make it fulfilling for you to really get the most out of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And as a matter of fact, today we're actually going to focus on Rosh Hashanah and even the Slichot services. So let's begin. Where did this whole concept of Rosh Hashanah come from? The new year. Well, is there such a thing in the Torah that says that yes, you will celebrate the new year, you will understand what you need to do to live a better life, you will have the 10 days of penitence, and then comes Yom Kippur. And where did this idea come from? It might sound elementary, but you know what? Hang with me for just a moment, because what you think you know, you might not know. And if you think you know it, there might be more than you really understand. So it all came from God saying, I want you to count 7 months. That number seven is important, by the way. I want you to count 7 months from the time that you left Egypt. That's it. 7 months from the time that you left Egypt. And that there will be a Rosh, that it doesn't say Rosh Hashanah, that will be a special day. In the seventh month, in the first day of that month, shall be a solemn rest to you, a memorial proclaimed with the blast of horns, a holy convocation. You shall do no manner of servile work, and you shall bring an offering made of fire unto the Lord. And of course, that comes from Leviticus, our Torah. And we have taken this day to say, okay, this is the day. This is the day that is the birthday of the world. Wonderful. God spoke and the world happened, and this was the day. It's what it was assigned. That's what it is. Okay? Now, let's understand something. The moment we begin to say that this is the day the world was born, as Jews, we are accepting the fact that God created the world. We're getting rid of some of the scientific data that many people have said, well, it didn't happen 5,000 some odd years ago. It happened millions of years ago. We're actually admitting to that. That yes, God created the world because we're here to celebrate that. And in our prayers, some of our prayers actually refer to that. Don't know if many of us remember that. So it is the birthday of the world when the new year starts. Now, are we alone in celebrating this time of the year as a birthday or something new and a time of renewal? No, we're not. Society has copied us. Why? Now, look, we know that in the English calendar, this happens anytime between the end of August, which happened one time, or all the way through October because of the addition of the month of Adar, too. But here's the important thing to remember. Watch this. When does a new school year start? Same time. When do the automobiles come out as being brand new? Same time. When does the TV networks begin to introduce their fall lineup, their new time? Aha, you got it. Around Rosh Hashanah, around the new year. I don't know if you ever made that connection or not, but it's clear as day. And when do college football and the NBA start? Yep, you got it. And there's so many others, by the way. So there is a trend that begins at this time of the year that started with the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah, the brand new year. And by the way, when we get a brand new car, what does that mean? Does that mean that we're no longer happy with the car that we have? Yep. Does that mean that we're making an investment in something brand new? Yep. Does that mean that we're changing our lifestyle? Yes. When we enter into a new grade in school, be it college, high school, elementary school, it doesn't matter. Your PhD, your master, what does that mean? That means you are adding on to the education of life, aren't you? Isn't that what life is about? Isn't that Rosh Hashanah is all about? It's adding on and getting rid of the old and putting yourself into something new. I don't know if we realize that. That whole concept comes from Rosh Hashanah. And the world has copied it. And many of us have forgotten it. It is the time of renewal. It is the time when we examine who we are. Now, you might say to yourself, okay, Andy, what does this have to do with football? Very simple. If you won a championship last year, are you going to go into this year saying, I don't want to win? Nope. Are you going to try and do even better? Yep. Are you going to try and be successful again? Yep. Are you going to try and get your game improved because you know other people are catching up to you or at least want what you have? Yes. Do we live in a very competitive world? Yes. Well, you see how you can relate sports to it also. So as we begin to really think about what Rosh Hashanah and the New Year does, not only for us as Jews, but for society as in general, those who are successful in life will always improve. Those who are successful in life will find new ways to do things. Those who are successful in life will take account of the things that are holding them back and eliminate them. This is true. Tony Robbins will tell you that. I will tell you that. Judaism will tell you that. Where do you think, you know the answer now, where do you think all these things come from? From our holiday of Rosh Hashanah in the beginning of the year. And each and every one of us, and we're going to discuss this when we're doing Rosh Hashanah services, by the way, each and every one of us are here for several different reasons. And we're going to examine that a little bit later. Now, some of this you might know. We Jews, do we have one name for everything? No, we got different names. So this you might know. If you do know it, at least you know that it's important. If you don't know it, it'll be something new. Anyway, to the point. There are 4 different names for Rosh Hashanah, in case you didn't know. The first one is Rosh Hashanah. which means what? Head of the year. Well, that's odd. Huh. It doesn't say New Year. It says head of the year. So why wouldn't we call it the New Year? Why do we have to call it the head of the year? Does anybody else ever call something the head of something? They don't. So what's the real meaning behind it? The answer is as follows. What starts our daily activities? Is it our body or is it our brain? It's our brain. And where do our brains live in our body? Easy answer. Up in our head. So if you're going to start something, you've got to start it intellectually, which is in your head, which is why it is the head of the year. It's a little bit different in the word beginning. Everything we do as Jews always has a different meaning. So it is the head of the year, the beginning of the year. I'm heading on my way to success. It's also known as Yom Teruah, the day of sounding the horn. Now that's a problem. Why? Do we blow the horn on Shabbat? No, we don't. But is Rosh Hashanah the only time that we blow the shofar? No. We do blow it, and I think we mentioned this once before, but it is worth repeating. In many synagogues, or in some I should say, they actually blow the shofar at the head of every month. Oh, wait a minute. Do we call it a new month, or do we call it Rosh Chodesh? What does Rosh mean? The head of. See the consistency? The head of the new month, or the head of the month, and the head of the new year. These things certainly have commonality. Let's even go a step further. So the sounding of the horn, we blow the shofar at the beginning of the month. At the shofar, with the exception of Shabbat, is also blown during the month of Elul every morning for the Shacharit service. Now, you've been to enough classes to know all about the shofar, right? It's supposed to wake us up, bring us up from our slumber, be an alarm. An alarm that something is wrong. Now, you might say to yourself, and justifiably so, there's nothing wrong with me. I've got a great life. I don't need this Rosh Hashanah stuff. I'm good at what I do. I don't sin. I follow everything. That's one way to look at it. But you got to ask yourself deep down inside, isn't there something else that could be done to make life even more enjoyable? Isn't it about time that I took a look at what I do and how I do it, just like I do my stock portfolio? Aren't there some stocks that are no longer worth what the value they should have? Aren't there other stocks out there in the marketplace that we look at every day, or our broker calls us, or financial advisor as they call it? Of course they do. So sometimes the stock goes down. That's a problem. But the shofar reminds us every day during the month of Elul to examine ourselves. The shofar reminds us at synagogue, and we'll talk a little bit during services what each one of the notes mean. Most of us might know it, might not, but I always like to review it. But it's the day for sounding the horn. Now, what would happen if we eliminated the shofar from services? What would happen? Think anybody would care? Oh, yeah. That's the central part of the service. When most people come to services for Rosh Hashanah, they have no idea what the rest of the service is like. It's regrettable. But they sure know what the shofar is. So that one horn, Yom HaTruah, the sounding of the shofar, the sounding of the horn, that's what does it. That's what brings people together. If you're going to schedule the time you're going to come to services, one of the first things you look at? When is the shofar going to be blown? And how do we know that? Because after the shofar is blown and the Torah is put back and the rabbi finishes his sermon, what happens to everybody? Mostly everybody, they're out the door. Okay. The next part of it is Yom Hadin. What's Hadin? The day of judgment. What are we judging? Well, two things. God judges us. Okay, I got it. But we also judge ourselves. Is that the right thing to do? Of course it is. It really is. Do many of us go to services or look at Rosh Hashanah when we look at the calendar and we ask ourselves, when is it going to fall? Do most of us look at ourselves and say, that day is the day of judgment? Or do we not? It should be the day of judgment. the big judgment, the head of the judgment. Because quite frankly, Tony Robbins will tell you, it's taken from Judaism, that we should, he's not Jewish, that we should study ourselves and judge ourselves every day. Is that asking too much? I don't think so. Because guess what? Are we happy to be judged or not? In other words, when you meet new people for the very first time, or somebody meets you for the very first time, aren't you a little bit concerned on how they're going to judge you? Yep. And by the way, you can control that. Because when you are confident and you are able to take that confidence without being egotistical and have other people have confidence in you, that's one of the keys to success. But you have to be able to judge yourself. You have to be able to balance yourself. You happen to have the opportunity on Rosh Hashanah to do that. And of course, Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance. What do we remember? What do you think we should remember on Rosh Hashanah? What makes it so memorable? On Rosh Hashanah, it's not what we remember, it is what God remembers. And what do we give him to remember? Him or her. Good stuff, bad stuff, improvement, or whatever. Because remember this in life, don't we always remember things about people? Don't we always remember good things and bad things? Oh, you remember that one time? Oh, you remember that one trip? Oh, that was horrible. Remember that one meal we had someplace? It was terrible. Remember that one meal we had someplace? It was wonderful. Do you remember how that guy or gal drives? It was horrible. We remember and we keep score. And you know what? The more bad things that is on that scorecard, guess what happens? The memories are not that good. So if you take a look at what we just talked about, and I'm going to get into some of the little customs a little bit later, but when you take a look at what the holiday really means, the deepness, the inspirational aspect of it, it's a lot deeper than just what the Sidur, the Machzor, what the Machzor says, isn't it? Huh. All right, let's take a look at some of the things that we do. Well, I talked about the fact that we blow the shofar leading up to the holiday, and during the morning services, we also have a special psalm called the Days of Awe, which goes all the way back to temple times, because we start to get that feeling. Is that unique? I don't think so. You know, many of us, when we plan or plan for a vacation, do we do it the day that the vacation starts? Did we make all the arrangements for airfare, for cruising, for hotels, for the type of clothing we're going to need, and all that kind of stuff the day of the trip? No, we did it leading up to it, and that is what the month of the Elul is all about. We are planning to understand how we are going to plan and improve ourselves on Rosh Hashanah during the month of Elul, just like a vacation time. So that's why it is important to understand that when Elul starts, that's what we do. You know, the other thing that we have, I don't know, I think we mentioned this once. When do you start wishing somebody a Happy New Year? Do you do it during the month of Elul? And by the way, it's not really Happy New Year. Let me stop right there. When we meet someone, we say Shana Tova, Happy New Year. That is not the correct translation of Shana Tova. It does not mean Happy New Year. What does it mean? Have a good year. What's the difference? What's the difference between a Happy New Year and a good New Year? Or a good year? Shana Tova. It's not even New Year now that I think about it. Shana Tova. Good year. Happy New Year. Let me explain to you the difference. When you say to someone Happy New Year, let's say it's January 1st. Do you tell them Happy New Year on February? No. Do you say Happy New Year after the first week, January 10th? Maybe. January 15th? No. But good year has no limit. That's why the word new is not there. Good year has no limit. We wish you a good year from the head of the year to the end of the year. One of those little secrets in Judaism that probably we didn't know. So Shana Tova does not mean Happy New Year. Shana Tova means good year. Have a good year. And you can start saying that, by the way, when? much earlier than Elul. Some people actually say it after the 17th of Tammuz. Some people actually wait, which is really more of the tradition, after Tisha B'Av. But you can say, have a good year, the entire year. All right, let's go to what's going to happen this coming Saturday night. This coming Saturday night, we are going to do the prayers called Slichot. Slichot. And you will all have this Slichot booklet, and we're going to make it extremely memorable. I'm looking for the cover. Here it is. Slichot. You're all going to have this book. We're going to do Slichot together. Well, this way anyway. And it'll be really meaningful. So, what is Slichot? What is this stuff? Well, and when did it start? So Slichot actually started during the blood-stained days of religious persecution in the Middle Ages, when the liturgical poets of Israel offered their laments to God, pleading for his mercy. The composition of these men was collected and now form the major portion of the Slichot prayers. And when we do the Slichot prayers, we're going to be talking about them, and some of them will actually be extremely recognizable, some of them, and some of them will not be. But that's the history. So we start off, if by the way, Rosh Hashanah starts off in the beginning of the week, then we do the previous 2 weeks to Shabbat prior, which is why we're doing it this Shabbat. So what occurred was Slichot was composed in Italy, in Rhineland, and in France, and in particular, examples of the work are found in these lands are found in present day collections. And it has a lot of different parts to it, some of which I'm going to talk about right now, some of which I'm actually going to hold back. So the Slichot services are actually more interesting. So what does Slichot mean? It means forgiveness. This is the default Slichot and compromises the vast majority of the Slichot services. So what do? We pray to God, and we use God's 13 attributes. And where did God's 13 attributes come from? Do you remember after the golden calf? It was at that time that God revealed his 13 attributes. And these are very important for the holiday, especially Slichot during the high holidays. And it is that he is God, he is merciful, he is gracious, he is long suffering, he is abounding in goodness, he is truth, he keeps mercy unto the thousandth generation, he forgives iniquity, he forgives transgression and sin, and he cleanses. You believe that? Do you believe that? I think as Jews, we do. And it can actually be somewhat proven. Somewhat. I'm not going to say it's definitive. It can actually be somewhat proven. How many Jewish people today follow the basic tenets of Judaism, if there is such a thing? Not enough. I'm not going to use the word not many. Not enough. Are we still here? Yes. Do we still prosper for the most part? Yes. Do we suffer? Yes. But we haven't been eradicated. And if you think about the number of civilizations that are no longer around, and there are many civilizations that are around, I think if we let our imaginations work with us, these 13 attributes tend to be true. And these 13 attributes make up the prayers. These make up the Slichot services where we go to God and we start to admit, listen, I goofed. Listen, Ashamnu, I made mistakes. This is what I did wrong. No, I'm wrong. Forget about it. What I just said was wrong. I did that intentionally. What I just said is wrong. It does not mean that what we just said. I didn't do anything wrong. We did something wrong. We are a community. Ashamnu. We. It's all plural. And even if we did not do a particular sin, it is considered and should be considered that we are part of a group and we have that responsibility of asking God for forgiveness as a total group, not as an individual. And it is for that reason that all basically our prayers for forgiveness are in plural. And it's very, 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 very seldom that you'll find a prayer which is just isolated to I. And we're always looking out for the other guy. Isn't that a great Jewish trait to have? Wouldn't it be wonderful if the entire world got out of their I business? This is what I am. This is good for me. This is my rights. And we actually started looking out for each other. That's also basically hidden in there. And God is patient with us. And we talk about that during the Slichot services. And the Slichot services, when they're done right, and I intend to do them right this coming Shabbat night because I get into these prayers. I really do, in case you couldn't feel it. So these Slichot services begin to set the mood. So it goes something like this. Before you plan something, you explore it, you investigate it, you look at it, you feel it, you get emotionally attached to it. And that's what the Slichot services are all about. It gets us started and it gets us thinking. So we have the Slichot services that are definitely part of what all the prayers are about on this coming Saturday night. All right, let's move on. So why do we visit graves during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Why do we visit the grave? Is it to honor the deceased? Is it to honor? We basically supposed to visit our parents. Do we do that because we want to show respect for them? Well, this originated in the belief that the righteous, and we consider our parents righteous, the righteous dead intercede for the living before the throne of God. So we go visit in hope that our parents will be talking to God and saying, hey, listen, my children down there, they didn't behave themselves pretty good. I'm up here with you. I'm pleading for you to be merciful. That was one of the original reasons why we visit the grave. Yes, I don't know if you knew that or not. Okay. But there's a problem in that. Because if we go to the grave and gravesite and we say that, we are basically saying we are talking to the dead. And we are asking the dead, if we believe in this original theory, and we are asking the dead to intercede for us with God. That's against Jewish policy, Jewish religion, and Jewish law. Because Jewish law says we are not supposed to have talk to the dead, to have them intercede. Now, what does that mean? Watch this. If we're not supposed to talk to the dead, that means that it is possible to talk to the dead, because it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah you can't talk to the dead. It says don't. I don't know if you ever found that as interesting as I do. So consequently, many Jewish teachers warn against any kind of direct prayer that will warn people not to do that. And the custom being observed is rather an act of piety in remembrance of lives that were worthily, there you go, worthily lived. Sorry about that. Worthily lived. And that's the important part. And when we go to the grave site, don't we, when we visit our parents, what do we say? We say, look at me. Look at me. Look at the life that I'm having. Look at what I've accomplished. Yeah, I've had problems. But we basically do a review, don't we? And we thank them for their guidance as parents. Isn't that similar to what we do when we pray to God and look and talk to God? And we say, listen, I did a lot of things right, did a lot of things wrong. God, thanks for your guidance. Thanks for the Torah. Thanks for your rabbis. Thanks for the teachings. Because it was that guidance that people like Tony Robbins and others steal from. And you've given it to me since I was born through my Jewish education. And I'm very fortunate to have been born Jewish so that I could have these things taught to me that I learned as a result of that. So visiting the grave gives us an opportunity to thank those who contributed to our lives and to also do a bit of a review of where we are in our life. And you know what? Sometimes we even commit at the gravesite to do things better. How about that? All right, let's talk about something else. So another one of our customs And that is dipping the apple in the fill in the blank, the honey. Now, you all know the reason why, right? Because it is time for sweetness. We're going to have a sweet life. We want a sweet life. What better way is there to take the apple and or the challah and dip it into the honey to have a wonderful time and a really sweet life? The whole thing is symbolic. And does it make sense? Yes. Is Judaism built on symbolism? Absolutely. Does it make a lot of sense to do that? Well, here's something you probably didn't know. Why the apple? Aha! Your first answer is going to be, oh, Andy, that's simple. It's the tree of knowledge, the apple. Yes, that was the whole thing. Don't Adam and Eve don't eat from the apple tree. Ah, remember, no one says it was an apple to begin with, but many people think that's what it was. So why is it the apple? The mystics interpret the red and white, which are combined in the apple, as symbols of the divine power and love uniting in harmony. Tradition has it that as many sweet things should be eaten at this meal. Of course, same thing with a brisket. That's what the festive meal is all about, right? Whoever makes the best brisket with all the sweet kugel and all the sweetness behind it, that's the festive meal. And that's what we do. But I don't know if you knew about the red and white. That's the mystics. I'm not asking you to buy into this stuff. I'm just sharing it with you. Okay. Now, we also have fish involved in our particular religion when it comes to the Rosh Hashanah. Why? Guess what? There is a custom that when you are having your festive meal, the head of a fish should be on your plate. The head of the fish. Why? Rosh Hashanah, the fish. But what does the fish, anybody, you ever think about this? What does the fish have to do with what? Rosh Hashanah. Why a fish? It's a very interesting answer that I'm going to tell you in a moment. Why the fish? Well, for several reasons. Number one, when you do tashlich, which I'm going to talk about later, there is a relationship there. But on the other hand, watch this about the fish. It is the first animal that was blessed by God. You know, I don't know if you knew that. It was the first animal blessed by God. And by the way, I want to go back to something about earlier, which I forgot, and I apologize, but I don't want to forget it. One of the first laws that God gave us was to count to the 7 months, if not the first law, to count the 7 months and look at that as the holiday that we're talking about. All right, I forgot that, but I want to bring it back. Now, here's a food that you cannot eat on Rosh Hashanah. One food, you know what it is? Here it is. No nuts. You are not allowed to eat a nut on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, why not? You might say, okay, this is a bit extreme. If you say that, I'm certainly not going to argue with it. I'm just relating to you what the tradition is. You know, in Judaism, there is such a thing called as gematria, which means every letter has an assigned number. And that's a lot of fun. And I think we've talked about this before. So if you take a look at the gematria for the word nut, it has the same numerical value as another word. Want to take a guess what it is? Sin. The numerical value of the Hebrew word for nut is the same numerical value as the Hebrew word for sin. And therefore, you are not allowed to have nuts because it reminds you of sin. I know what you're saying, Andy, that is ridiculous. But you know what? So much of life is built on symbolism, even outside of the Jewish religion. Really, you know that as well as I do. Superstitions and the whole 9 yards outside of the Jewish religion. So the Jewish religion has this one, and all of a sudden we might be saying to ourselves, uh-oh, this is not good. So in any event, that's one of the reasons why some people do not have nuts. But what is the difference, by the way, between, excuse me, between have a sweet year? Why a sweet year? So it goes back to something that they found, the Hasidic movement found this. I want to share this with you. And it comes from Exodus. And when they came to Marah, they did not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Now watch this. What was bitter? The water or the people? the water or the people. And they go on to explain they were bitter refers not to the waters, but to the people themselves. Watch. The bitter in soul will find bitterness everywhere, but all things sparks of holiness for the sweet of soul. You know that that is right. Have you ever met a bitter person? Yep. And how do they look at life? In bitterness. Have you ever looked at life in bitterness? Yeah, I must admit I have on occasion. When I take a look at the poverty in the world, when I take a look at the social injustice in the world, when I take a look at so many things that are wrong in this world, I'm bitter. These things are not right. And what's the opposite of bitter? The opposite of bitter is sweet. Judaism professes, especially around, not only especially around Rosh Hashanah, but throughout the entire year, that we should not be bitter. We should take actions if we find bitterness in the world, but we should always look at the sweet side of life. Now, I know what you're going to say. Andy, that is ridiculous. There is nobody that could be happy all the time. There is nobody that would ever discount bitterness in this world. This is all utopia. It's not going to work. Well, I can tell you this much. Tony Robbins would never say that. I've been to a Tony Robbins 4-day session. By the way, he's the guy that trains people to walk on coal. He would never say that. And neither does Judaism. And he's not Jewish. Let me rephrase that again. He's not Jewish. He would never say that whatsoever. Okay? Never. So we should always look at life in the sweetness that it has, because guess what? This is the life we live in. And if we eat sweet foods, it psychologically should get us in a mood for sweetness. Now, there's only one time when we actually eat a bitter food or are supposed to eat something bitter. And when is that? You know, at Passover, right? Supposed to have something bitter on Passover to remind us of the bitter times. So do you want to be reminded all the time of bitter times, or do you want to be reminded of sweetness? That's where the honey comes in. That's where the sweetness comes in. And that's another deeper meaning of the holiday that you might not have been familiar with, especially the apple. All right, let's talk a little bit about challah. Yes, what kind of challah do we have? We have round challahs. What is round challah? Why is it a round challah? Pardon me, as compared to the challah that you normally have for Shabbat? Very simple. It's a circle of life. Is that the only type of challah shape that you can have on Rosh Hashanah? That's a rhetorical question. The answer is no. You can have a different type of challah. What is a different type of traditional challah? Guess what? It's a ladder. Ever seen a challah in a ladder? It's a ladder. You should have a challah with a ladder. Why of a ladder? Because the ladder represents the ladder of Jacob's dream. There goes the symbolism again. And it also talks about the ladder of life. You can either go up or you can either go down. By the way, why would you want to climb down a ladder? Well, to get back to the ground. I got all of that. Okay. But in the business world, what do most people say, or even in life, right? I want to climb the ladder of success. There are some people that will argue that Judaism keeps us from success. There are some people that argue that you have to spend so much time in shul, so much time in inspiration, so much time in spirituality, so much time doing this, that, and the other, then how the heck can you be successful? Well, the opposite is true, because Judaism teaches us how to be successful. How do we know this? Because we happen to be extremely successful people. That's how. So you should have a challah that is built like a ladder, with the highest rungs being success and prosperity. What is wrong with that? What is wrong with at the head of the year, we make ourselves a statement that says, this year will be a sweet year. This year, I will have sweetness in my life, and I will share that sweetness in other people's life. And the more sweetness that I am able to project, you know what? The more successful of an individual I am. Because, by the way, how does one become successful? By being self-centered? No. By caring for others. Yes. By the better you this is true in business, in anything. The better you satisfy somebody else's life, the more successful you will be. The more self-centered you are, the less successful you will be. And that is illustrated in the shape of the challah. How are we doing so far? You learning some new stuff? I hope you are. All right, let's go on to Tashlich. Oh, here's another great Jewish tradition. You betcha. Let's all go to the lake. Let's take our breadcrumbs. Let's give it to the fish. The water's got to be going in a particular direction, according to in some individuals. And there you go. It's got to be, you take the bread, you throw it in the water, the fish eat it, you disposed of your sins, and it's a wonderful thing. It's symbolism. But it is brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. So first, let's examine why a fish. Why can't you give it to an animal? Why can't you find an aardvark? Why can't you find some needy animal? I mean, have you ever seen a fish saying, I want bread? No. Do other animals eat bread? Yeah. Do we eat bread? Yes. So what is the connection between the bread and the fish? Well, guess what? How many times does a fish close their eyes? Nada. Zero. They never close their eyes. They don't. Ever see a fish blink? Nope. Ever see the head of a fish with their eyes closed? Nope. Even when it's on your plate? Nope. So what does that mean? That means the fish's eyes are always open, just like God's. God's eyes is always open, watching, seeing, and everything his eyes or hers never closes. So the symbol of the fish, including that was the first animal that was blessed, is part of the whole Tashlich service. And it says as follows: the prophet Micah speaks of God casting the sins of Israel into the depths of the sea. You see, that's where that tradition comes from. The prophet Micah speaks of God casting the sins of Israel into the depths of the seas. He will again have compassion upon us. He will subdue our iniquities, and thou wilt cast all their sins into the depths of the seas, called Vatishlach, from the prophet Micah. On the basis of this verse, the custom arose for Jews to go to a river on the first afternoon of Rosh Hashanah, the second afternoon if the first falls on the Sabbath, and there to recite this and other verses and various penitential hymns and prayers. By the way, in the Talmud, where does it talk about Tashlich? If you don't know, it's a correct answer. There is no mention of Tashlich in the Talmud at all. As a matter of fact, the first writings came from a fellow by the name of Jacob Molan in 1425, and he was the author of Sefer Maharil, and he's the one that first discussed it. Thus some see in the river a symbol of the primordial waters over which the Spirit of God hovered, a reminder of creation. And as I said, the fish in the sea always remind us of God's eyes being open. Does everybody agree with that? No. There's a fellow, the Gaon of Vilna, preferred to ignore the Tashlich ceremony and spend the afternoon in Torah study and the recitation of Psalms. Wow, some interesting customs and some interesting in-depth analysis of what Rosh Hashanah does. Now, you know, when you go to a service, in traditional synagogues, the rabbi and the cantor, and they also do so on slichot. I won't do this to slichot, because I'm not there. I don't even think we have it. They wear the robes, and what do they do with the Sefer Torah? They change the Sefer Torah from its traditional all-year cover into white. Now, why white? And is there another time of year that we wear the white? Yeah, for the very observant, it's and traditional. It's on Passover for those elite services. They wear the kittel there for that service is a Seder, pardon me. But when you do the services for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it's very traditional. Some people wear black too, but it's very traditional to wear white. To what does white represent? Purity and innocence, all part of symbolism. So let's go ahead and examine some other things. And if you're still with me, I'm so grateful because there's even more information coming. So we covered the events leading up to Elul, or starting in Elul, I should say. We covered some of the deeper meanings behind the name of Rosh Hashanah. We covered Tashlich. We covered some of the sweetness the New Year, the Good Year, and the whole 9 yards. And then in services, we do a 3.5, 4, 5 hour service. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. And when we do services together for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I will make it a point to really get deep without extending services too long, by the way, but make it really meaningful so that we understand why we're there and what we're doing. So, and I know you can say to yourself, look, Andy, I don't need that. I've been going to service since I was a little kid. I'm in my 80s. I'm in my 90s. I know everything I need to know. But I can guarantee you there'll be some other things like I hope you learned today that you did not know existed earlier. So we have the Machzor, and we have the special prayers, and we have the prayers about the book of life and the book of death, and the etc. Is there such a thing as the book of life and the book of death? Is there such a thing? Who shall die? Who shall live? Who shall die by earthquake, by sword, by this, by that, by that? Or is it one of these rabbinical traditions that the mystics had thought up? This is what God is probably doing. Because is there any proof whatsoever? Can we shorten services and get rid of all this symbolism stuff? What do you think? The opposite. It is part and parcel of what it is all about. And here's why. Tony Robbins and any motivational speaker and anybody will tell you that if you have goals, what are you supposed to do with those goals? Keep them in your head? Nope. You're supposed to write down your goals. Now, you're not supposed to write on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, so don't say Andy Greenberg told you to write. But it is symbolic. It is symbolic because when you say to yourself, "This is what I want to accomplish. This is when I want to accomplish it. This is my bucket list." Let me think about that for a moment. We all have bucket lists. Some of us are still working on it, which is a good thing, by the way. Some of us have completed our bucket list, which is a good thing, by the way. But many of us wrote it down. And God, according to the symbolism, writes these things down. He writes them down. You know this. He writes them down on Rosh Hashanah and he seals them on Yom Kippur. Wrong, 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 wrong. Does not seal them on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Actually, the tradition is after Sukkot he seals them. And we'll talk about that when those holidays come up. So it is extremely important to understand what the lesson that we learn here that we can adopt to our lives, and that is write things down. Write your goals down. So what does that mean? As we get up to Rosh Hashanah, and there are things about your life, your attitude, your sweetness, your bitterness, your smiles, your frowns, and your troubles, your blessings, write them down. Take a look at them. And say to yourselves, which one of these do I want to get rid of? Which one of these do I want to improve on? What is my action plan? How am I going to get this accomplished? So even if that whole thing about the book of life, the book of death, and whatever, we'll get more serious on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. But when we start writing these things down, that's what everybody tells you is how life is improved. So let me ask you this question. Many of us say Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, I got it. But what happens if we wouldn't have it? I could see some of your faces. Perish the thought, Andy. What are you talking about? Perish the thought. But the moment you start thinking about not doing Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, you become fearful. Why? It is part of life. It is part of Judaism. It does serve a purpose other than opening up the Machzor and reciting the prayers. It does have deeper meanings. I will tell you that in when I teach Hebrew school, and I do this in third grade, and anytime people need to be reminded, and we talk about Shabbat. Oh, the kid, I don't like Shabbat. I don't want this. I don't want that. So I might have told this to you. So I take out a piece of paper and I said, you know what, guys? You know, I'm an educator in Judaism. Okay, and I have here a letter. Signed by the chief rabbi of the Orthodox movement, the chief rabbi of the conservative movement here in the United States, all of them in the United States, and the chief rabbi of the Reform movement, and several of the others. And what they've agreed upon is that due to lack of interest, Shabbat is canceled. Whew. How do you think the kids react to that? Yahoo! That's great. Boy, get rid of the opposite. They get upset. They really begin at that point to realize the value of Shabbat. Same thing with Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. If Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur was canceled because of lack of interest, because people are not sitting there for the entire service, people just come there for the shofar, which if they do, that means it is extremely meaningful and impactful for them, even if they don't know all the intricacies behind it. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, if taken away, would be devastating. It's part of who we are. It is part of our DNA. So I want to welcome you to this coming Shabbat evening Slichot services, which will be extremely meaningful and get us all in the holiday spirit. I want to welcome each and every one of us to the services for Erev Rosh Hashanah, for the day of Rosh Hashanah, for the evening of the first night of Rosh Hashanah, and of course for Rosh Hashanah second day, and Kol Nidre, and of course for Kol Nidre, Yom Kippur morning services, and of course afternoon and Ne'ilah services. We'll be together in meaningful, powerful, spiritual services that will really help us to become better people and better Jews. So that the next time that we see an advertisement that Tony Robbins is coming to town to teach us how to be a better person, we can take that and say, that's what Judaism is all about. That's what the head of the year is all about. And that's what sweetness is all about. May we all have a Shana Tova. May we all be written in the book of life, in the book of sustenance, and in the book of health. And I'll see you all on the holiday services. Thanks so much for staying with me, and I hope you learned a lot. I'm Andy Greenberg. We'll see you next time. Bye.